This video is going to be breaking down early game itemization 0 to 12 minute mark on all carry heroes and exactly what you need to be thinking about when buying certain items.
Banana slam jam.
So for the sake of breaking it down, we are going to divide it up into 3 stages. We're going to do 0 to 5 minutes, which we're going to call the laning phase, 5 to 8 minutes, which is the post-laning phase expanding into the jungle, and the 8 to 12 minute phase, which is the early game farming phase. So for each phase of the early game, we have to consider whether or not we need items that help us right now, or that we can start buying items that are for the future stages of the game, and that is what we would consider greedy. So for 0 to 5 minutes, the items that will help us in the laning phase are all about trading and sustain. We have to be able to stay in the lane such that we can farm the creeps in lane. So for agility heroes, items that do this are items that either make you a threat or more survivable. Items like Orb of Venom, Blightstone, Boots, Windlace, or Raindrops. Items that help you trade better are Wand, as well as Wraithband. These are all items that you only want to buy if you need them in the first 0 to 5 minutes to lane. On strength heroes, on the other hand, we have Bracers, similar idea to the Wraithband, Boots, Wand, and then more oftenly for strength heroes, we'll talk about having like a Helm of Iron Will for sustain, or we're talking a Ring of Health because strength heroes often have more sustain issues than agility heroes. So the key note to have here about these items is that if you don't need them in the first 0 to 5 minutes, you often will not buy them. The only exception is an item like Morbid Mask, Ring of Health, or Helm of Iron Will, which builds into items you're going to buy later, such as Mask of Madness or Armlet, etc. So the goal is to get out of each one of these phases with buying the least amount of items that are set in that stage as possible. Some lanes as a carry, you will need double Wraithband, Wand, and Raindrops in order to survive the lane. Other times, you can just keep your circle at the very start and go straight into Tread's Mask of Madness for efficiency. And that's what we're going to hopefully help you guys visualize with each item you're going to buy. Do you need it now, or is it meant to help you later? And it's all about understanding, do I need the help now? And if I don't need the help now, we can then move on to the next stage of items that will allow us to accelerate our game much further. So when it comes for the next phase, we're looking at the 5 to 8 minute mark, which is the part of the game where most heroes are able to start jungling as well as laning. Most of the time, you'll do enough right-click damage or have enough spell damage to push out the lane and farm jungle, or farm jungle and return to lane before it starts hitting your tower. So keep in mind, going into this stage, certain heroes need a lot more items to be able to farm lane and jungle at the same time. Heroes that have innate farming steroids, whether that be Sven with Cleave, or whether or not that be Terrorblade with high stat gains and illusions, those heroes will need much less items to jungle and lane at the same time, as opposed to a hero such as Anti-Mage, who has to purely right-click for farming. So at this stage in the game, the items you would have to buy are items that allow you to not only lane, but also incorporate jungle. So when we talked about in the laning phase, we said if you need the item to sustain and trade in lane, then you buy it. In this stage, we're going to talk about if you need that item to accelerate your farm fast enough, you will buy it. A lot of this also has to do with living. One of the biggest issues from 5 to 8 minutes for carries is the fact that the offlaners and mids have begun to hit 6. So you need to be able to survive their ultimates as well as have enough pace of farming. That's why sometimes you'll see, even though Luna wants Mask of Madness to accelerate her farm, she'll opt to go Dragonlance or Yasha because it doesn't make her nearly as susceptible to ganks. So we have to consider how fast we farm between lane and jungle with no items, and we also have to consider how fragile and vulnerable we are to the ganks of the opponent. So in this stage, when we're looking to solidify our farm from 5 to 8 minutes, we have to consider upgrading our boots, from brown boots to phase for movement speed and elusiveness, or treads for tread swapping efficiency, as well as just outright damage output compared to cost. We can consider going efficient stat components of items like Yasha as well as Dragonlance. Even though the item itself is 1900 gold or 2000 gold, each individual component does slowly but surely accelerate our farm. On heroes that don't need any of these items to either be survivable or farm fast enough, examples are Wraith King as well as PL. These heroes will farm innately fast with their kit. They'll often go for items that are much bigger, and they'll work towards those. Wraith King in the case of Radiance, PL in the case of Diffusal. So this is the stage where we start to decide, do we need to go that one small item before that Battle Fury? Do we need to build ourselves up towards greedier items? Or do we have the survivability and farm pace to go for an item like Midas, to go for a naked Battle Fury with brown boots? Or do we get to go Maelstrom with no sustain on a hero like Lifestealer who has built-in sustain and pretty good survivability and just needs to accelerate our farm? So this stage is all about understanding the balance between farm speed and survivability on the map. So the reason why I've made a distinction between the 5 to 8 minute mark and the 8 to 12 minute mark is oftentimes for the 5 to 8 minute mark, we still haven't left our lane. If we started in the safe lane, we're probably still in the safe lane at this point. So the 8 to 12 minute mark, I call the early game because rather than just being a breakdown of the lanes, it generally means that we're also potentially all the way in some other jungle or laning in a completely different lane. So now we need to think, if we're going to be no longer in our own lane getting supported constantly, what do we need to be thinking about with our items? So the 5 to 8 minute mark survivability items are all about if we get invaded, if we try to get killed by the offlaner or the mid, how do we survive this? 8 to 12 minute mark is all about the interactions we'll have with any hero on the opponent team while we are still trying to farm. So what I mean is you have to start considering your matchup to all 3 enemy cores and even potentially supports. If you have certain heroes on the enemy team that kills you and that would thus stop you from farming, do you have to possibly buy an item that would allow you to farm against that hero? Such as a Dragon Lance for stats against an enemy Tiny who could burst you full to 0 otherwise. Such as Phase Boots if you're against an enemy Ursa, and if you lane against them as Juggernaut and you don't have Phase Boots, the Ursa will just run you down and kill you. And if we're talking about bigger items, we're going to refer to this stage as building us up towards being able to farm against people. So items that make you a threat can often allow you to farm against heroes you previously couldn't. So a perfect example of this is choosing between Manta or Diffusal on PL. PL is a hero that if an Ember runs at him and tries to kill him, if he doesn't have any way to threaten the Ember can stop him from farming. But once he gets a Diffusal, the mana burn can be a serious deterrent to interfering with your farm. So 8 to 12 minutes is where you start to gauge your interaction with opponent heroes. And if you have to threaten them to keep them from threatening you, you can buy items like this. You can consider Blade Mail on a hero like Spectre, heroes like Lesh that would kill you if you didn't have a Blade Mail. You can consider Echo Saber as an item that helps you lock down enemy targets, Deso as a damage item on a hero like PA as opposed to Battle Fury. A lot of this stage is building up the first item that is going to allow you to farm more past the 12-minute mark. I use the 12-minute mark as an arbitrary number because oftentimes both supports are level 6 at that point. Team fights have begun to happen somewhat consistently, and if an enemy hero wants to be near you stopping your farm, they usually have their item that will allow them to do that. So you thus have to be prepared for that stage by the 12-minute mark. So by the end of the 12-minute mark, I believe all carries should aim to have several key things. By the end of the 12-minute mark, you should have at least one of these components checked off, and as many as possible if you're looking to farm as efficiently as possible moving forward in the game. First off is survivability against at least one core. That's sometimes why you'll see, I use PL as an example again, go Hood of Defiance early game because they're scared of heavy magic burst damage killing them as early as 10 to 12 minutes into the game. This would be comparing Armlet as survivability compared to rushing a Radiance on Wraith King. Next component would be wave clear speed. That's why most of the time Anti-Mage will go Battle Fury, while Juggernaut does not necessarily have to go Battle Fury, because Juggernaut has spin as a way to clear waves, while Anti-Mage only uses actual right clicks. The ability to contribute to fights. That if you can build an item that allows you to participate in fights, you should build it. So that's oftentimes where a Slark does not go Midas, because if he buys one small item like Echo Saber or Diffusal, he can usually contribute to fights. And that's why a hero like Faceless Void can usually go greedier items such as Maelstrom Mask of Madness, because his Chronosphere is enough of a contribution to fights. And also, on the other hand, you have a hero like Anti-Mage, where pretty much no matter what item he builds, he's not going to be useful in fights. So this is a component of the game he doesn't worry about. And then lastly, objective threat, the ability to hit towers. So if your hero does not have any of the above characteristics, or you have as many of those as checked off as possible, you can look to buy items that allow you to take objectives. For Ursa, that's a Morbid Mask. For heroes like Terrorblade, ranged agility cores, that's a Dragon Lance that lets you siege towers. And some heroes have these things built into their kit, which means they're much more prone to buying items that do the other things. So when you're dealing with a hero like Slark, you have Dark Pact that clears waves. So it's great that you can skip that one and look to go for the objective threat, contribution to fights, or survivability. But Slark already has great survivability, so we check that off. We check off wave clear speed, so usually his first item will address the ability to contribute to fights because Slark does not hit towers very well, and he also does not kill Roche. Another example would be Troll Warlord, who has great objective threat built into his kit with Fervor and great survivability with his ultimate, so usually his first item will accelerate his farm, such as a Maelstrom or a Battle Fury. And the reason why a hero like Wraith King is able to rush a Radiance unlike many other cores is because he has survivability built into his ultimate, he has sustain built in with his life seal, and he also has wave clear and objective taking because of his skeletons. And he also has the ability to contribute to fights because he has a stun. So because he checks off so many of these boxes just with his innate kit, he's allowed to go for much greedier items than other carries would normally be able to. So this is my conceptual guide on how to itemize for the first 12 minutes of the game. I'm hoping that I can see this where I don't have people skipping laning items and going straight Midas and dying 3 times, but also seeing people not buy triple Wraith Band when they're looking to jungle super early on a hero like Luna when they could have been more greedy with something like a Mask of Madness. The goal of this guide is that you guys can envision what type of items help you at each given stage in the game and understanding the distinction between going greedy or not. And a lot of times these are concepts we throw around a lot, but there's no clear explanation for what is defined as greedy, and because a hero like Wraith King going for Radiance is not nearly as greedy as others because of the boxes that he ticks. So we want to understand that as a carry, we have a job in the game when that comes down to these 4 things that need to be checked off, at least as many as possible, by the 12-minute mark, and it is considered overly greedy if you can't do any of these things. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, all that bullshit, and I'll see you guys next time.